2 years ago, thousands of protesters from all over the world converged on the American city of Seattle, where the World Trade Organization was meeting. This was news because it happened in America. And yet throughout the world, in Africa, Latin America, Asia, a deeper movement against globalization has been growing for years, but this is not considered news. On every continent, millions of ordinary people have protested against the power of the IMF and the World Bank and the imposition of Western power. People have marched and petitioned against privatization, against selling off their water, against turning their farms into suppliers for the dinner tables of the rich. Now the protests have spread to Western countries, from Seattle to Melbourne, London to Genoa. The coverage of these events follows a pattern. It seems it's only news when there's violence, even when the great majority of the protesters are peaceful. In contrast, the violence of the economic policies they are protesting about is seldom news. In the weeks and days leading up to May Day in London, the police and the government orchestrated a propaganda campaign. The aim clearly was to alienate the public from the demonstrators by representing them collectively as violent and by suppressing the very issues that have public support.
The limits of tolerance are passed when protesters, in the name of some spurious cause, seek to inflict fear, terror, violence and criminal damage on our people and property.
To Tony Blair, the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer is a spurious cause. And when May Day came, 6,000 police turned part of London's West End into a giant detention camp.
I think the issue of violence, which we're constantly asked about, is our main way in. I think that the key to these things is actually getting mass amounts of people involved, because the media will put one point of view across time and time again, you know, the mindless hooligan side. But when you think about the mass redundancies, the poverty, the starvation, the literal raping of a country through third world debt and what have you, that is violence on a huge scale. It's genocide.
The newest ruler of the world is the World Trade Organization based in Geneva. The Economist magazine calls it an embryo world government, and yet no one has voted for it. The effect of its policies make it illegal for governments to hinder the profits of big business. This is known as free trade.
If there's one feature about the global economy, it's the companies have globalized. But we haven't regulated the global companies. And that's the change that we've got to put into this international system if we're ever going to get rules that are fairer to workers, fairer to the world's poor, fairer to all of those who are affected by this international production system.
People can't stand by, they can't be spectators when we're faced with forces like this. They join this movement and the movement starts to gather momentum. Already we've had some extraordinary successes. We managed to stop the implementation of a crazy idea called the Multilateral Agreement on Investment, which would have allowed corporations to sue governments for the removal of any law which they didn't like. Now that was being promoted, that idea, by the 29 most powerful countries on earth. It was being promoted by all the major multinational corporations and all the big institutions such as the World Trade Organization. And a ragged band of dissenters around the world managed to stop it. We beat them. And if we can beat that, we can beat anything.
What is with the people is the fact that the corporations and the superpower are using more and more fabricated propaganda. People can now see through the spin. People know they cannot believe anymore what is said. And the people are starting to withdraw their support. They're starting to say, no, a government that only protects the Pepsi and the Coke and the McDonald's is not our government.
In rich countries like Britain, globalization is well advanced. The disastrous selling off of the railways and the creeping privatization of everything from healthcare to air traffic control. The financial pages celebrate a booming economy, yet 1 in 5 British children grows up in poverty. More than 10 million Britons live in poverty. And this is said to be a spurious cause. All over the world, millions of ordinary people are asking why they have no say in decisions that bring hardship to their lives. They don't accept the view of President Bush and Prime Minister Blair that there's no other way. In Britain, the fact that only 25% of the electorate voted for the Blair government is part of this great unease. Why, people ask, should we accept a system of winners and losers, a system that puts a dollar sign on every public service and almost every human value? Why not abolish the World Bank and the IMF and the World Trade Organization and replace them with genuine trade and development institutions that are democratically accountable? And why not cancel a debt that condemns nations like Indonesia to poverty and disease? These are dangerous times. The one superpower left in the world has made its ambitions clear. This is a document of the United States Space Command. It says, the globalization of the world economy will continue with a widening between haves and have-nots. It says only military dominance will protect America's commercial interests. Why should we accept this? Why should our children have to face these divisions and dangers? None of them is God-given. All of them can be changed.